Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere. I'm your host, Connor Jones, and this is not Call Her Daddy at all. This is Untold Tales from This Side of Nowhere, where we tell stories about growing up just about as close as you can get to this side of nowhere. That is Poverty Flats, Wyoming. Before we get started, here's a message from our sponsors. We're sponsored by Basins Market, located in Basin, Wyoming. Basins Market is your destination for groceries, fresh produce, and the best meat department in the Bighorn Basin. Come in and sample their wide selection of products Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sundays from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. We're also sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program distribute both welcome baskets and table talk brochures that get the word out to newcomers to the Bighorn Basin and restaurant goers about our local businesses. The Wyoming Welcome Baskets carry promotional offers and coupons, and the table talk brochures, in addition to advertisements, carry things that diners like to read, like jokes, information about Wyoming, and the month's holidays. So, if you're interested in joining either of these programs, go ahead and contact Haley at HALEYJ at WyomingWelcome.com. And now, the podcast. Track season is out here in Poverty Flats. If your machine breaks down halfway to nowhere, you're in for a long walk home. That's why I've been using Lookover Power Sports, a handy little app that helps you track maintenance and set reminders, even with a photo right from the trail. It works for dirt bikes, side-by-sides, snowmobiles, and just about anything with a motor. You can try it free for a month, and it's 50% off until Labor Day. Start by visiting lookover.app, because breakdowns make bad stories, unless they're someone else's. We are also sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The Wyoming Welcome Program offers two services to local businesses: Table Talk and the Wyoming Welcome Baskets. Wyoming Welcome Baskets are filled with promotional items for local businesses and distributed to new move-ins to the Bighorn Basin. Table Talk brochures include jokes, facts about the state of Wyoming, the month's holidays, and advertisements from our local businesses. These brochures are placed on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell for diners to peruse. So if you'd like to get your business name out there, please contact the folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program by shooting an email to HaleyJ, that's HALEYJ, at WyomingWelcome.com. And now, the podcast. Well, it has been a little crazy around the Jones household. Just about Labor Day weekend, our irrigation pump for our lawn blew up. It was too big for the system, I've discovered. And on 3 of the zones, it would water hammer, it would run and kind of do this chugging thing. So I had to hook up a garden hose and allow the system to relieve some of the pressure. And last Saturday, Friday, I hooked the garden hose back up, but I forgot to open the valve. And so when the pump kicked on in the morning, it water hammered for about 45 minutes, and it fried the pump. So I tried a lot of things, but couldn't get it back to life. So I ended up buying a pump from someone on Facebook for, considerably less than I would have paid for the new pump. But I got it all hooked up and running yesterday. And once again, our grass is getting green and the garden is getting water. So that's nice. It's good to have that working, but it's been a process. So yeah, got her done. Thank goodness. But comparatively, fixing my irrigation system has not been nearly as much work as building an entire house. And that is what today's story is about. So, here we go. The title of today's story is Line Upon Line. When people say, "We bought some land and we're building a house," 9 times out of 10, they mean they are paying someone to build a house for them. Perhaps they'll choose a layout and peruse some paint colors, flooring, and the like, but they very rarely do any of the real work. Of course, I shouldn't fault anyone for doing this. Most people don't have the skills necessary or the tools to actually build a house. And of all things, you want the construction of your home, of your private sanctuary, to be done right. But I always think people misspeak when they say they are building a house, when in fact, they are not building a house at all. My bias comes in large part from the fact that our family did in reality build our house. When I was about 5 years old, my parents moved our family from Rupert, Idaho, back to Poverty Flats, Wyoming, where Dad had been raised and close to where Mom had been raised. We lived in a tiny 3-bedroom trailer house with a small addition on the front end that included a 4th bedroom, some storage, and a living space. Not long after arriving in Wyoming, we began construction on our house. This house was to be the dream house, my mother's dream home. It would have enough bedrooms that only 2 rooms would be shared. One where Candace would share with Annie, who was young and didn't want to sleep in a room all by herself, and the room for Fred and I. Fred and I had no problem sharing our room since, being twins, we shared everything else, from matchbox cars to underwear. The point is, this house was going to be everything we had dreamed of, hence its designation as the dream house. Dreaming about the larger kitchen, more bedrooms, and pipes that didn't freeze during the winter was one thing, but actually building the house was quite another, as anyone who has experience in construction can tell you. Before we could even begin building, we had to acquire the lumber. And while most people simply buy this part of their house, particularly the sane ones, we sought out all of our lumber. On the family homestead in the Bighorn Mountains, we had about a square mile of land homesteaded by my great-great-grandfather, and it had a good stand of pine trees. So Dad decided he could save a lot of money by sawing out his own house. When I was a kid, I didn't realize what a novelty this was, because the Jones family had been sawing out lumber since the Hoover administration. My great-great-grandfather, Isaac Jones, and his family homesteaded on the mountain land back in 1929, and it wasn't long after they began sawing out lumber with an enormous circular saw that could be connected to the PTO shaft of a tractor by means of a large canvas belt. The tractor-driven saw was used to saw out lumber for a small 1-room cabin, and later the addition to the cabin. Grandpa Jones had sawed out his house. Later, with a gas-powered bandsaw, Uncle Greg and Aunt Janet also sawed out their houses. Now we were doing the same. For Mom and Dad, it was an incredible amount of work, but for us kids, it was a marvelous adventure. We spent weeks on the mountain, roaming through wooded hillsides, picking raspberries and building forts. We gave names to cliffs and rock formations, explored caves, and played cowboys and outlaws. We even built teepees for an Indian village using the ample supply of slats, a byproduct of milling lumber, and strips of garbage bags to tie them together at the top. All the while, Mom and Dad worked nearby, selecting dead trees that were dry and free of pine beetles and rot, then sawing them down and milling them into lumber that would build our dream home. Us kids frolicked nearby, free and unsupervised, and it was marvelous. That was when I really came to love the mountain. At the end of the summer, we had to return to school. For Fred and I, it was our first grade year, and little did I know what an impact it would have on me. During first grade, Fred and I went neck and neck in a handwriting competition, which Fred ultimately won. Spending so much time on his entry, the rest of the class moved on to story time. Meanwhile, Fred kept plugging away, forming each letter on the little letter highway paper with its rows of 2 solid lines and 1 dotted line in the middle. Make sure the capital letters touch at the top and bottom, and get those lowercase letters right to the middle so they just touch that dotted line. That's how you win a handwriting competition. Mrs. Smith also got me into reading. It was she who introduced me to the Boxcar Children and the Hardy Boys. It's a terrible thing to do to a kid, give him a book. Immediately, I was hooked. Fred, too. We read like we were drowning and books were air. We devoured books. We raided the library and crammed titles into our little backpacks so they were fat with hardcover DK Eyewitness books and paperback novels. The bus ride from the K-12 school in Burlington out to Poverty Flats took a half hour, and we read to and from school. Candace was playing volleyball that year, and middle school girls' volleyball games provided the perfect opportunity to read for an hour or so, nestled in the bleachers with a bag of popcorn. That's the way to watch a volleyball game. No offense, volleyball players. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad poured countless hours into the dream house. In January, the road up to the building site was completed. It was a few acres situated at the top of a hill, about a mile from the trailer house. The first time we went up to it, there was a dead cow lying near some cactus and sagebrush. "This'll be the front door," Dad announced proudly. Mom and us kids surveyed the sand and the cactus, the sagebrush and the dead cow, and wondered what had happened to Dad. When did he go crazy? To get up to the building site, we had to bounce over a 2-track dirt road across the patch of BLM land everyone referred to as the isolated tract. Now there was a brand new, proud gravel road that cut a straight line along the fence on one side of a row of fields. It was 0.6 miles long, and it allowed the dirt movers to get up to the site so they could dig the basement. Long-armed excavators bit at the soil and dug through the sandrock, piling dirt into huge mounds that made perfect king-of-the-hill playgrounds for Fred and I. It was the last part of building the house that Dad would pay someone else to do, until a high school friend stretched carpet 3 years later. Through the winter, Dad set up concrete forms. And in the spring, the cement trucks came, Mom insisting Dad go ahead with the pour, even though she was in the hospital. She had just given birth to Caldwell, the last of the 7 Jones children, but knowing she would take the baby home to the trailer house made her tell Dad, go ahead. She would be fine, and delaying the pour would mean living with all 9 of us in the trailer house even longer. No, sir, please go do the concrete. So Dad went and supervised the pour. That afternoon, when he went back to check on the concrete, little Annie slipped and fell into the hole. 2 Jones kiddos were in the hospital that afternoon. Annie was fine, and Caldwell was too. God was watching out for the Joneses. As summer approached, the basement walls went up, and giant pump trucks came and filled them with yards and yards of concrete. Us kids came to watch, and Mom took pictures with her silver Canon camera, piecing together the 4x6 prints so that the whole truck and the basement walls were visible. It was a panoramic picture, done the old-school way. Fred and I finished first grade and started in on the summer reading program. The county library in Basin offered prizes for reading, and we were going to win them. I must have spent an hour poring over the illustrated cross-section book of Star Wars ships and vehicles, reading about TIE fighters and the Millennium Falcon. Work on the house continued, and there was plumbing and a giant septic tank that had to be lowered into the ground with a crane. The leach field was laid with big black corrugated pieces of plastic buried in the ground. Our dog Zeke watched the process, these crazy humans digging holes and burying enormous bones. Why did they dig so much? Just to fill the holes back in again. Come fall, Dad was crafting basement walls and framing them out, drilling holes into the concrete and fastening the bottom plates down with blue Tapcon screws, and so much concrete dust and noise. Then, what excitement! He crafted stairs. We watched in awe as a 2x8 became a row of stairs, chewed out by a hungry circular saw that bit at the wood. 3 of them were raised up, finally connecting the basement to the ground floor, and it was no longer just a hole in the ground, but truly a basement. Before long, there were floor joists connecting everything, and the lumber pile was reduced mightily as we worked to build a floor over everything. I remember eating lunch in the shade under a section of the floor. How wonderful it was to eat a meal inside the house, even if it was just in the rough-framed walls of the basement in a patch of shade. Summer ended and school started up again. Fred and I were in 2nd grade with Mrs. McGee. Unsurprisingly, she was a book pusher too. If we thought we were reading a lot in 1st grade, then we were woefully mistaken. I started branching out, and by the time Christmas rolled around, I was taking on The Hobbit. It was so good I decided to keep going. Read The Fellowship of the Ring, the first book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Meanwhile, progress slowed on the house. Mom and Dad had purchased their business in town, the pharmacy. It required a lot of time and attention, and it wasn't until spring the walls started to go up on the ground floor. When the spring rains came, they flooded the basement since there wasn't a roof on the house yet, and the task of vacuuming the water out fell to us kids. We would take turns running the big wet and dry shop vac, sucking gallon after gallon of the filthy water out of the basement and hauling it up the stairs to be dumped outside. Though the water never got much deeper than half an inch or so, over so much area it amounted to a lot of water. One weekend we were working on the house as a family. We were finishing up the foundation and framing out the garage, and there was plenty of work for everyone. I wasn't too disappointed to be running the vacuum that day, and not just because helping with the garage was a lot of work. I had discovered that if I wedged the hose of the shop vac just right between the studs in the basement wall, I could read a book while the vacuum did its work. It was early June now, and unable to take library books home for the summer, I had started in on a book series we had at home. Harry Potter had cast a spell on me, to say the least. I couldn't put it down. A little flood in the basement wasn't about to stop me from finding out what happened to the boy who lived. There I was, happily sitting on a bucket, the book cradled on my lap. The vacuum was howling beside me, the hose carefully positioned in a large puddle. As the water slowly migrated across the concrete and up into the vacuum, I pored eagerly over the pages of the book. I'm not sure how long I was down there reading. There was a lot of water, and it was a pretty long book. The vacuum could hold about 5 gallons, and I usually let it run until it filled, which could take a really long time if you knew what you were doing, and you were reading a really good book. Either way, it could have been a half hour, or an hour that went by when I was interrupted from my reading by a strange sound. I didn't really notice it at first, since I was so absorbed in the world of witchcraft and wizardry. At first, I disregarded it entirely, which was only made easier by how loud the shop vac was. But it kept on going, and eventually got enough of my attention to make me look up from the page and wonder what it could be. It was loud and blaring, the sound coming in short staccato blasts. What could that be? Finally, I reached over and switched off the shop vac, noticing the puddle the hose had been sitting in was now a very dry patch of concrete. Honk, honk, honk. Now the sound was louder, more insistent, and it dawned on me. Someone was laying on a car horn like they were stuck in New York traffic. What on earth? I muttered and closed my book. I rose from my bucket and felt the ache in my backside. When did my legs fall asleep? With tingling feet, I walked up the wooden stairs and emerged on the ground floor. I turned and looked out to the driveway and saw Dad's pickup truck, with him inside it, looking just a little annoyed. Or maybe amused. He waved me over and I broke into a run, my book cradled under one arm. When I got to the old maroon truck, I opened the door and climbed in. "Hey, bookworm," Dad greeted me. "Sorry," I said, breathless. "I hope you weren't waiting too long." "I've been honking the horn for a minute," Dad said, the hint of a smile flickering across his face. "Really?" I said. "The shop vac is really loud." "Mm-hmm," Dad said, raising an eyebrow as he put the truck in gear and started down the hill. "Sure." "Where's everyone else?" I asked, suddenly realizing Dad and I were alone. Now Dad was really smiling. "They're all down at the trailer house," Dad said. "We had all just loaded up in the van to go to Basin when Candace asked where you were." "What?" I gasped. "You mean you were going to town without me? You left me up here alone?" "I don't know if you were really all alone," Dad grinned, nodding toward the book on my lap. "You didn't even notice we had left." I gave him a sheepish smile. "No, I didn't," I admitted. "Is there any water left in that basement?" Dad asked. "A little," I said. "Sure." Dad nodded slowly as we rattled over the second cattle guard. He glanced over at me. "What part are you at?" I asked, looking up from the page I was reading. "Sorry, this is a really good book." Dad just laughed and shook his head. Well, there you go. Another untold tale from this side of nowhere. I think that building that house probably was one of the most influential things that I ever did in my life. And man, it was a lot of work. I don't think that my childhood self would go back and do it again. But I've always dreamed about building my own house too, sawing out the lumber and building it from scratch with my own two hands. We'll see if it ever happens. But it was a good experience. Spent a lot of time together as a family and a lot of time reading at the house. So, and if you haven't read Harry Potter, I gotta say, you need to try it out. It's kind of crazy, but it's been over 20 years since the first Harry Potter book came. Okay, approaching 30 years since the first Harry Potter book came out. And Lord of the Rings, oh man, those are good too. And those ones, I think we're getting close to 100 years since The Hobbit was published. Yeah, good old Tolkien and J.K. Rowling. Anyways, it's been really good sharing this story with you. I hope you had a good time. And if you have built your own house, whether in the traditional sense of having a contractor come and do some work, or in the Crazy Jones sense of doing everything yourself, I'd like to hear about it. I am always I'm always excited to talk about books too. So whatever your comments or questions are, you can email me at untoldtalesthepodcast@gmail.com or respond on Facebook when this episode drops, and I'll be happy to hear from you. As always, this has been another Untold Tale from this side of nowhere. where we work twice as hard for half as much and still find time for the important things, like fishing. See you next time, folks.